massive footprints in the snow that don't match any known animal on Earth.
The footprints that they find don't look human in any way, shape, or form.
For years, the Yeti lived in the shadows of our imaginations, a creature of legend, tucked away in old Himalayan folklore and dusty expedition journals. Most dismissed it as a tall tale. Others were content to call it superstition. But on April 9, 2019, that quiet dismissal cracked wide open. That morning, an Indian Army expedition was trudging through a remote, icy mountain pass along the Nepal-China border. It was the kind of terrain that chews up the unprepared and spits them out. Cold, high, and unforgiving. Nothing unusual was expected. But what they stumbled upon? That was anything but ordinary. A line of enormous footprints stretched across the fresh snow, as if something massive had wandered through just moments before. These weren't random indentations or animal tracks distorted by melting snow. They were clear, measured, and deliberate. A trail. Each print measured an astonishing 32 inches in length and 15 inches across, far beyond the size of any known animal native to the region, and certainly larger than anything human. The sheer depth of each footprint suggested enormous weight. Whatever made them wasn't just big, it was heavy. The shape was strange too. These weren't rounded paw prints or hooves or anything recognizable. They were elongated, uneven, and distinctly not human. No known species, not bear, not yak, not snow leopard, matched what was left behind in that snow.
The footprints measure about 32 inches long by 15 inches wide, which is significantly beyond what any normal human footprint should look like.
The soldiers, stunned but composed, did what anyone would do in 2019. They took pictures. Then they did something few expected. They shared them with the world. From the official Indian Army Twitter account, they posted the images alongside a message claiming that the Yeti, yes, that Yeti, might have just revealed itself. The tweet stated clearly that they had found something unusual and suggested it could be linked to the legendary creature people had chased for centuries. Within hours, the internet exploded. Skeptics rolled their eyes. Cryptid believers celebrated. Scientists demanded further analysis. But one thing was certain: no one could look away. Because the moment we saw those prints, we had to ask, what if the myth was never a myth at all? A legend older than time? But let's back up for a moment. The Yeti has haunted the dreams of many explorers for thousands of years. No matter where you went or what they called the Yeti, the creature, the abominable snowman, or the wild man of the snows, it was always just out of reach. This isn't some new age internet myth. Stories of a hairy, hulking figure roaming the icy slopes go back as far as the 4th century BCE. Even Alexander the Great wasn't immune to the Yeti's legend. When he marched into the Himalayas in 326 BCE, he heard whispers of a snow beast.
In 326 BCE, as Alexander is attempting to conquer the Himalayas, he hears these stories about this wild man of the snows. And so he sends members of his army out to go and see if they can find this beast, but to no avail.
A towering creature, half man, half animal. Even his curiosity got the better of him as he ordered his soldiers to hunt it down. They came back empty-handed. People speculate that the mountains kept their secret. From wild man to abominable snowman. Fast forward to 1899. A Scottish explorer, Lawrence Waddell, published a book titled Among the Himalayas. In it, he detailed a chilling experience. At 17,000 feet above sea level, he and his guides found strange footprints carved into the snow. Not an animal, not human. Confused, he asked his guide about it. And the guide, well, he didn't flinch. Calmly, as if it were a common occurrence, he called it the hairy man of the eternal snows. This wasn't a one-off event. In 1921, British explorer Charles Howard Berry found similar tracks at an even higher altitude. But this time, he saw something. Far in the distance, lumbering across the ridge, a dark figure moved slowly but deliberately. It was big, too big. Against the blinding white snow, its silhouette was unmistakable. Howard Berry reached for his binoculars, trying to make out more, but the figure vanished, swallowed by the landscape. When he asked his guides what it was, they gave the same answer: Mito Kangmi, the wild man of the snows. But here's where the story gets twisted. When a journalist reported on Howard Berry's expedition, they mistranslated the local term. Instead of wild, they wrote filthy. Just a minor mix-up, right? Except for that moment forward, the Yeti gained a new title, the Abominable Snowman, a creature now mythologized in the West, with a name straight out of a horror movie. More than one name, one mystery. But here's what's so fascinating. It's not just one culture keeping this legend alive. Across Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, and deep into Siberia, the story takes on different forms: protector, monster, spirit, even god. Tibetan folklore calls the Yeti the glacier beast, a guardian of sacred peaks. To trespass into its domain is to risk death, not out of malice, but as punishment for disrespect. Some say the Yeti is violent. Others describe it as shy and elusive, avoiding human contact at all costs. And then there's the Chinese version, the Yeren. In the forests and mountains of China, tales of hairy wild men run rampant. The Yeren is said to roam the highlands, powerful, unpredictable, and terrifyingly human-like. One particularly bizarre tale is that if a Yeren comes across a person in the woods, it gets so excited it hugs them, hard, then faints. When it wakes up, it eats you. Is this folklore or a twisted truth? It's hard to say. A tooth that changed everything. But what if the Yeti isn't just a story passed down through time? What if the roots of this legend lie not in fairy tales, but in ancient biology? In 1935, a Dutch anthropologist named Ralph von Koenigswald was on a trip through Hong Kong when he wandered into a medicine shop. There, he found a strange artifact, a massive molar, labeled as a dragon's tooth. Locals believed it had magical properties if ground into powder. But von Koenigswald wasn't superstitious. He was a scientist, and he knew what he was looking at. He knew it wasn't a dragon, but instead, a primate. He bought the tooth, took it back to his lab, and after extensive research, he made a stunning discovery. The tooth belonged to an unknown species, a prehistoric ape, and it was a giant one. It would have stood nearly 10 feet tall and weighed over 1,000 pounds, covered in thick hair, walking upright, a beast not entirely unlike the Yeti. He called it Gigantopithecus. Gigantopithecus, the missing link? Could the Gigantopithecus be a real creature and a part of our evolutionary family tree? It couldn't be a myth or a guess because we have the fossils. They lived in what is now China and Tibet over 2 million years ago. Most experts believe they went extinct about 250,000 years ago. But not everyone is convinced. Some researchers argue that in the vast, unexplored wilderness of the Himalayas, with its deadly terrain and impossible-to-access peaks, who's to say that something like Gigantopithecus couldn't have survived, adapted, or changed? What if we're not dealing with myth, but evolution? Could this be why we keep missing the Yeti throughout the years? Because instead of disappearing, it keeps taking on a different shape. In the 1950s, British zoologist Eric Shipton found a trail of strange tracks high in the Himalayas. He made a plaster cast of one footprint. The shape was something in between a man and a bear. It was something ancient. After studying the cast, some scientists concluded it might indeed belong to a large, unknown hominid, possibly even Gigantopithecus, or its descendant. In 1977, anthropologist Grover Krantz joined that chorus. He believed a small population of Gigantopithecus could have survived, hidden away in the unforgiving mountains. And that survival might explain the modern Yeti. But here's the problem. We don't have a complete skeleton. Only teeth, a few fragments of jaw. That's it. Could a giant primate species really have stayed hidden for this long, without more evidence? It sounds improbable, but then again, so did the coelacanth, a prehistoric fish thought extinct for 66 million years, until it turned up alive in 1938. Nature has secrets, and she guards them well. Just because something hasn't been found doesn't mean it isn't there. We've mapped more of the surface of Mars than we have the depths of Earth's oceans. And the Himalayas? They're just as mysterious, remote, dangerous, and filled with regions so untouched that even satellite imaging struggles to give us the full picture. And yet, people have been reporting encounters for centuries. But are they all just seeing things? Is it just snow playing tricks on the eyes? Or is there something up there, hiding, watching, surviving? The 2019 prints, impossible to ignore. Let's go back to those 2019 footprints for a second. The Indian Army didn't stumble on a single print. It was a trail, multiple impressions in the snow, walking in a straight line, just like a bipedal creature would walk. Now, skeptics jumped in immediately, claiming it's just melting snow, creating distorted prints, or maybe a bear walking on its hind legs, or perhaps an elaborate prank. Except, no prankster in their right mind would risk trekking into sub-zero temperatures across high-altitude terrain that literally kills the unprepared, just to fake some prints. Besides, how do you fake 32-inch-long prints without leaving a single other trace? No human-made snowshoe even matches that footprint's shape. And what about the spacing? Whatever made those tracks had a gait far longer than any man. So what's going on here? One theory, a surviving offshoot of Gigantopithecus, evolving over hundreds of thousands of years to become even more elusive, more adapted to the brutal cold. And let's not forget, it wouldn't be the first time humanity's been wrong about what's out there. Think about the mountain gorilla. Until 1902, Western science insisted it didn't exist. Locals in Central Africa had talked about a giant ape for centuries. It wasn't until a carcass was finally brought to Europe that scientists accepted the truth. So the real question might not be, is the Yeti real? But what will it take for us to finally admit we don't know everything? DNA, disbelief, and the unexpected. But here's where it gets weirder. There's DNA involved. In 2017, a team of scientists decided to take this mystery seriously. They gathered physical samples from alleged Yeti sightings, bones, hair, even feces, from remote Himalayan locations. They tested them, and guess what they found? Well, the results were unexpected. Most of the samples turned out to belong to known animals: bears, dogs, yaks. But not all of them. A few samples didn't match any modern species. Just let that sink in for a moment. Some of the hair analyzed couldn't be traced to anything in existing global DNA databases. That means the hair, whatever it came from, doesn't belong to any cataloged species we currently know of. Is that definitive proof of the Yeti? No. But it is proof that the Himalayas are hiding biological secrets, creatures we haven't classified yet, creatures we might never have seen. We've been wrong before. And let's talk about the psychology of belief. Why is it so easy for us to laugh off the Yeti? Because it sounds ridiculous? So did the platypus when it was first described. Scientists thought it was a prank. Someone had sewn together a duck's bill and a beaver's tail. And yet, it's very real. Lives in rivers, lays eggs. Nature doesn't care if something sounds weird. So maybe the Yeti doesn't either. Encounters in the cold. But of course, not all the evidence is physical. Sometimes, it's personal. Mountaineers have reported the same story over and over. While hiking alone, they feel watched. They hear heavy footsteps. But when they turn, there's nothing there. In some stories, climbers claim to have caught a glimpse. Not a clear view, but something massive, upright, moving fast, covered in fur, and vanishing into fog. Call it fear. Call it a hallucination. Or maybe it's something much more primal. Our ancestors feared something in those mountains, enough to build legends, pass down stories, and draw symbols. What exactly were they trying to warn us about? The spiritual guardian. Then there's the idea that the Yeti might not be a creature at all, but something else entirely. In Tibetan tradition, the Yeti is sometimes described as a spiritual guardian, a deity of the highlands, a protector of sacred places, or an enforcer of balance between humans and nature. And that makes you wonder, are the sightings we've heard just brushes with something more supernatural? Could the Yeti exist on a level that science can't measure? Some monks claim to have relics, supposed Yeti skulls, bones, even scalps, kept hidden in remote monasteries. Whether they're real or symbolic is up for debate, but the belief is unwavering, and belief has power. Ancient survival, modern adaptation. Now let's go back, far, far back, millions of years. Gigantopithecus was no joke. 10 feet tall, 1,000 pounds, thick muscle, thick hair, adapted to forests and highlands, a true giant among primates. It roamed what is now China, Vietnam, and Tibet. We know it exists. We have teeth, jaw fragments, massive ones, and then it vanished. Or did it? Here's the wildest idea yet. What if the Yeti isn't just a descendant of Gigantopithecus, but a separate branch? One that evolved in isolation. One that adapted not only to survive in the snow, but to hide. Modern evolutionary theory supports the idea that isolation can lead to radical adaptations. Look at the island rule. Animals cut off from the rest of their species either shrink or grow. The Himalayas are a natural fortress. It's so vast that anything is possible. What if a species of ape, cut off by altitude and glaciers, slowly evolved into something smarter, stronger, and more elusive? What if that's the Yeti? A global pattern. And then there's something even more interesting. There's a global connection. Yeti in the Himalayas, Yeren in China, Bigfoot in North America, the Almaz in Mongolia, the Orang Pendek in Sumatra, the Mapinguari in South America. Different names, same idea. Giant, hairy, bipedal hominids are seen in remote wildernesses. It could be a coincidence maybe, but maybe, just maybe, these aren't different legends. Maybe they're different sightings of the same thing. A global species, fragmented by geography, whispered about in myth. And that brings us back to today, to a world that still isn't sure what it saw in 2019, to photos that are still debated, to footprints that don't quite fit the mold, to legends that keep resurfacing. Science doesn't like loose ends. And the Yeti? It's the ultimate loose end. But until someone captures one or brings back a full skeleton, the mystery remains open. It's tempting, cold, and just out of reach. which of course makes it all the more compelling. After all, it's not always about proving something exists. Sometimes, it's about daring to wonder if it could. The obsession begins. Let's be honest, the Yeti isn't just a creature, it's an obsession. And once the idea plants itself in your mind, it grows, until you're standing on the edge of a frozen cliff, squinting into the mist, wondering, what if? Expeditions have come and gone, some serious, some theatrical, some downright bizarre. From wealthy eccentrics in the 1930s to National Geographic-sponsored scientists in the 80s, people have trekked into the white wilderness chasing a shadow. And every time they come back with half-truths, a hair sample here, a photo there, footprints that vanish mid-trail, eyewitness accounts that sound insane, until you realize they're all telling the same story. Different countries, different languages, but the same towering, hairy, upright figure, hiding just out of sight. Governments got involved. In the 1950s, a Yeti fever gripped the world. After British mountaineer Eric Shipton photographed a series of massive footprints near Everest, the West went wild. His photos were published worldwide. The New York Times ran front-page stories. Coffee shop chatter suddenly included cryptids. Even the United States government took note. In 1959, the U.S. State Department issued official Yeti expedition guidelines for American travelers in Nepal. These guidelines were legit with rules, including one that said, if you see a Yeti, don't shoot it, unless it attacks you. Another rule, if you kill one, bring the body to the Nepalese authorities immediately. The real question is, why draft laws for something that doesn't exist, unless someone believed it might? Even the best see it. Of course, not everyone hunting the Yeti is a scientist. Some are thrill seekers, others, true believers. People like Reinhold Messner, arguably the greatest mountaineer in history. In 1986, while alone in Tibet, Messner encountered a creature he swears wasn't a bear. It was massive, standing upright and watching him. He later wrote a book claiming the Yeti might be an unknown species of Himalayan bear, but he also admitted it didn't act like any bear he'd seen before. And when a guy who's climbed Everest without oxygen tells you he saw something strange up there, you listen. From monster to mascot. Still, for every credible account, there's a cartoon, literally. Movies, video games, cereal boxes, they've turned the Yeti into a joke, a cute snow monster, a punchline. And sure, it's fun, it sells tickets. But here's the problem. Every time we turn the unknown into a mascot, we push real mystery a little further into the dark. Because somewhere beneath the pop culture fluff is a core of serious questions we've never answered. What are these footprints? Why do multiple cultures describe the same creature? And why do the people who live in the mountains, the Sherpas, the monks, the elders, speak of the Yeti not as fiction, but as fact? To the locals, the Yeti isn't just real, it's sacred. It guards the mountain. It protects the balance. To the outside world, that might sound like spiritual poetry. But to those who live in the shadow of the peaks, it's a matter of survival. To them, the Yeti is a protector in the unjust mountains. Disrespect the land, and the Yeti appears. Cross the sacred threshold, and you might not return. Maybe that's superstition. Or maybe it's something older than science. Maybe it's a warning passed down, not because it sounds good, but because it's true. A night in the woods. You're out camping in the middle of the woods, armed with just a night vision camera, when something unbelievable happens. That's exactly what took place in May 2012 near Quincy, Florida. Retired Army Ranger Stacy Brown Sr., now passed away, and his son Stacy Brown Jr., a filmmaker, were camping in Torreya State Park, searching for the legendary Bigfoot. Equipped with a FLIR thermal camera, the two set out on a trail when strange noises started echoing around them. Stacy Jr. recalls, "We'd hear something running to our right, then our left. It would stop so suddenly, it gave us chills." Then, Stacy Sr. caught sight of something. Using the thermal camera, he spotted a small black shape peeking out from a tree. Moments later it moved, a massive figure crossing the gap between trees. Panic set in. The elder Stacy's voice trembled as he said, "We gotta go. Do you have your gun?"
Then it takes off and crosses this gap, and he goes into full-blown panic mode. The camera goes dead. He's like, "We gotta go, we gotta go." He's like, "Do you got your gun?"
They bolted back to their truck, heart pounding, and reviewed the footage. What they captured was jaw-dropping. The thermal video showed a creature that looked strikingly similar to the iconic image from the famous Patterson-Gimlin film of 1967. If you've seen that clip of Bigfoot walking along a Northern California creek, you know the one. It's legendary in Bigfoot lore. For Stacy Jr. and his dad, this wasn't just another eerie moment in the woods. This was proof. He simply said, "Who on a random Tuesday night is running a mile and a half into the woods without a flashlight?" Interestingly, the Florida area is known for its Bigfoot sightings, although locals have their name for the creature, the skunk ape. Reports of the skunk ape date back centuries, with Seminole and Muskogee tribes calling it Esti Kapkaki, or tall man, a forest protector. The skunk ape is said to be smaller and leaner than the Bigfoot of the Pacific Northwest, likely due to Florida's tropical climate, but it shares similar traits, including a strong, unpleasant odor. Skeptics often wonder if sightings like this could simply be people wandering the woods, but thermal imaging cameras tell a different story. Wildlife experts explain that clothing blocks heat signatures, creating cold spots on camera.
It was shot with a thermal imager, and so it's picking up the heat signature. Typically, if any clothing is being worn, it masks the intensity of the heat emanating from those covered parts of the body. Honestly, don't see any of that.
This figure, however, displayed an even natural heat signature, suggesting it wasn't clothed. But who, or what, could it have been if it wasn't wearing clothes? Some theorize it could be an escaped exotic animal, like a gorilla or chimpanzee, from Florida's infamous private zoos. However, scientists like anthropologist Kathy Strain have analyzed the footage and noted that the creature's gait and posture didn't match any known ape. Its bent knee walk, broad arms, and muscular legs were more in line with descriptions of Bigfoot. Could it have been a hoax? It's always a possibility. Critics argue that thermal footage would typically show more movement before the subject vanished. Stacy Jr., however, insists the camera malfunctioned after the initial clip. In the end, what was captured remains a mystery. Whether it was the legendary Florida skunk ape or an overzealous nocturnal camper, one thing's clear: this deserves a closer look. These stories keep us wondering, what's really out there in the shadows of the forest? The Wood Booger Encounter. It's April 2009, and Chuck Newton has taken his young son into the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia to have some fun with the family's ATV. Chuck is barreling through a rocky ravine, kicking up dirt and showing off for his young son, when suddenly, he stops dead in his tracks. Something strange crosses their path. It's tall, hairy, and walking on two legs as if it doesn't have a care in the world. What was that? Let's take a closer look. From this wide shot, as we zoom in and slow down, we can see it's a bipedal figure. Its size is striking, at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. It's hard to imagine what else in these woods could fit that description.
What was that?
Field researcher Cliff Barackman explains that sightings like this aren't new. Reports of large, hairy humanoids in this area go back centuries. Native American tribes, like the Cherokee in Virginia, told stories of giant, human-like creatures covered in thick hair. The tales from the Cherokee echo stories from other tribes across North America. These beings were often described in remarkably similar ways, even by people separated by thousands of miles. As Barackman puts it, the simplest explanation is that they were all describing the same kind of animal, Sasquatch. Even the local newspapers have a history of reporting on strange sightings. In 1892, an article described a massive upright creature covered in thick hair. Back then, the word Sasquatch didn't exist, so locals called it the Wood Booger. The name might sound funny today, but back then, it struck fear into people's hearts. The Wood Booger was said to roam the forests at night, snatching children who wandered too far from home. The word booger shares roots with the term boogeyman, used in much the same way to keep kids from straying into danger. This particular sighting has sparked plenty of debate. Barackman finds Chuck's reaction especially convincing. When Chuck turns to the camera and says, "Did you see that?" it feels genuine. He doesn't linger on the camera. He quickly looks back to follow the creature as it walks away. That kind of focus, Barackman says, is typical of someone experiencing something shocking and unexpected, not someone staging a hoax. Barackman has visited the ravine with Chuck and believes his story is credible.
I find Chuck's reaction to be very natural. I've had the opportunity to go to this location with the witness, Chuck, and I found him to be very believable.
Paul Freeman's Trail of Tracks. Sightings like this one aren't limited to the Pacific Northwest. After the Civil War, reports of Sasquatch-like creatures spiked in the American South. One theory suggests that Confederate soldiers hiding in the woods might have been mistaken for these creatures. But that explanation doesn't account for the Native American legends, which predate the war by hundreds of years. The creature is walking upright, a behavior we'd only expect from a human or maybe a bear. But bears on their hind legs tend to waddle and take small steps. This being, however, strides smoothly, taking steps much longer than a bear could manage. Biologist Floyd Hayes is skeptical. He finds it strange that the creature seems so unfazed by the noisy ATV approaching it. To him, this looks more like a person in an ape costume, or maybe even a fabricated video. But anatomy professor Dr. Jeff Meldrum isn't so quick to dismiss it. He points out that many Bigfoot encounters happen near roads or water, and the sound of the stream could have muffled the noise of the ATV, making it less threatening. Meldrum also notes the creature's size. If it's truly over 7 feet tall, that would make the possibility of it being someone in a costume much less likely, since commercially available costumes aren't designed for people that large. In the end, the experts are left scratching their heads. This could be an unknown mammal. If it's not a hoax, it's fascinating to think there might be creatures like this out there, just minding their own business while humans come across them. And this is just the beginning.
Probably put it at no more than 7 feet. All these off-the-shelf costumes, they're not made for a 7 or 8 foot tall person. So if we could establish larger size, that would certainly lessen the chances of it being someone donning a costume.
In the early 1990s, U.S. Forest Patrolman and Bigfoot investigator Paul Freeman made a discovery in the Blue Mountains of Washington State that would change the way people think about Sasquatch. But that's a story for another time. Paul Freeman and his colleague came across something incredible in the Blue Mountains of Washington State. Hundreds of massive footprints that, according to Freeman, could only belong to a Sasquatch. He carefully measured the tracks and made plaster casts, convinced that this area was a Bigfoot hotspot. Over the years, the evidence didn't just trickle in, it poured. In 1992, just a short distance away in Deduck Spring, Freeman filmed what he claims was a Bigfoot ambling through the woods. The creature reportedly left more of these huge tracks behind. Then, 4 years later, even more footprints appeared in nearby 5 Points, pressed deeply into the damp forest floor. Take a closer look at these tracks. They're enormous, 14 inches long. If they're genuine, they belong to something massive, far larger than any human. But size isn't the only clue. Many of these prints were pressed so deeply into the ground that they revealed something unusual, a mid-tarsal pressure ridge. What's that? Field researcher Cliff Barackman explains that this ridge is a key difference between human feet and what's believed to be Sasquatch anatomy. Humans have an arch in their foot, making it rigid and preventing it from bending. But Sasquatches? They don't have that same stiff arch. Their feet are flexible, bending at the mid-tarsal joint, located just behind the metatarsal bones near the ankle. When a Sasquatch pushes off the ground, this flexibility often leaves behind a telltale raised mound of dirt, right behind the toes. Skeptics have suggested that Freeman staged the whole thing, creating fake tracks to drum up attention. But Barackman isn't so sure. He said they know what fake footprints look like, he explains, pointing to comparisons between Freeman's casts and known hoaxes made with wooden prosthetics. Those hoaxed prints lack the flexibility of a real foot. Wooden prosthetics, for example, can't replicate the mid-tarsal break or create the dirt mound that Freeman's prints consistently show.
Many of these footprints penetrate into the ground quite deeply, and this photograph right here, you can see right there, the mid-tarsal pressure ridge.
Check it out. According to Barackman, this mid-tarsal pressure ridge is one of the key differences between human and Sasquatch anatomy.
This idea of a mid-tarsal break has become a cornerstone of Bigfoot research, thanks to anatomy professor Dr. Jeff Meldrum. His hypothesis has helped distinguish potential Sasquatch tracks from fakes and has pushed the scientific understanding of these creatures forward, one step at a time. But not everyone has been quick to jump on board. Anthropologist Kathy Strain points out that some have questioned Freeman's credibility because he seemed to find evidence everywhere he went. Tracks here, tracks there, and of course, that now famous video. It's easy to see why people were suspicious. Even Meldrum himself was initially skeptical. So he decided to investigate Freeman's claims in person, showing up unannounced to examine the evidence. What he found surprised him. Freeman had discovered tracks in the 5 Points area that didn't match any known local animal. Meldrum noted that while bears might seem like a possible explanation, their footprints don't fully match up. A bear's heel is pointed, not rounded, and it doesn't leave a complete, flat impression like a Sasquatch would. But the real clincher was, once again, that mid-tarsal pressure ridge. It ruled out human footprints and made it highly unlikely the tracks were fake. For Meldrum, this was a game changer. So could these prints be genuine evidence of Sasquatch? The skeptics remain, but with discoveries like these, the mystery only deepens. If nothing else, Freeman's findings give us something to think about. What kind of creature could leave tracks like this in the forest? Whatever it is, it's bigger, heavier, and stranger than anything most of us could imagine. Here's where things get fascinating. The prints found by Paul Freeman don't just show that characteristic mid-tarsal ridge, they also have consistent proportions and orientation across multiple years. Jeff Meldrum points out that a particular track found in Mill Creek in 1991 matches prints discovered years later in both size and unique foot structure. Meldrum and Cliff Barackman believe that these tracks might not just be real, they might all belong to the same individual Sasquatch. The same prints have been documented in 1991, 1992, and 1996, showing remarkable similarities. If that's true, it means this specific creature has been roaming the Blue Mountains for years. Based on Meldrum's research, Sasquatches may live between 30 and 50 years. That would make this individual somewhere between 15 and 25 years old during these sightings. It's an incredible thought, evidence suggesting not only a real, undiscovered species, but also a glimpse into the life of a specific member of that species.
This evidence demonstrates the existence of an unrecognized species.
We're sure these prints don't come from a bear. They sure look different from known fakes. And that mid-tarsal ridge appears to eliminate the human foot too.
Bigfoot's voice or unknown wildlife? Now let's jump ahead to January 2022. Boyd Sims, an avid wildlife recorder, set out on a month-long expedition in Texas's Sam Houston National Forest, about 50 miles north of Houston. His goal was to capture animal sounds, but what he found left him stunned. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Boyd recorded dozens of eerie sounds he believes could be Bigfoot calls. These weren't the typical noises you'd expect from local wildlife, and after years of searching, he still hasn't identified any known animal capable of making them. Boyd is convinced Sasquatch is definitely here in Texas, and he's not alone. The Sam Houston National Forest is a hotspot for Bigfoot sightings, with more than 40 reports each year. Some go back as far as the 1800s. A fisherman even found 13-inch footprints near the forest, another piece of evidence that something big is out there. These recordings aren't the first claims of Bigfoot vocalizations. The Sierra Sounds, recorded in California's Sierra Nevada mountains during the 1970s, are considered the gold standard of Bigfoot audio. Some experts believe they captured an intelligent, possibly linguistic conversation in a previously undocumented language. Could Boyd's recordings be part of the same phenomenon? Experts suggest these sounds may serve practical purposes for Sasquatches. The loud, whooping calls could help males and females of this rare solitary species find one another or establish territorial boundaries. It's not unlike the deep, booming calls of male orangutans, which use laryngeal air sacs to amplify their voices across vast distances. Could Sasquatches have similar air sacs? If so, they might also be capable of producing infrasound, low-frequency noises used by animals like elephants and whales to communicate over great distances. Infrasound can even affect the physiology of listeners, triggering emotions like fear or unease. Witnesses have described feeling their very core vibrate when hearing these sounds, as if the Sasquatch was using infrasound to scare them off. But what about Boyd's recordings? Forensic audio analyst Dr. Robert Maher examined them, starting with comparisons to local animals. A wild boar was ruled out. It makes short, chirpy sounds, not the sustained howls Boyd captured. Foxes were also unlikely candidates since their vocalizations are more modulating and inconsistent. Coyotes, however, presented a closer match. Maher noted similarities in pitch and tone between the Sam Houston recording and typical coyote howls. While he couldn't confirm the sound was a coyote, he admitted it was a possibility. But what about Bigfoot? Maher compared Boyd's recording to the Sierra Sounds, the most famous alleged Bigfoot audio evidence. The Sierra Sounds feature short, yipping tones, quite different from the long, drawn-out howls Boyd recorded. So, is it Bigfoot? The jury's still out.
We see a continuous sort of tone, but it's very short in duration and tends to be more of a yippy quality.
But between the footprints, eyewitness accounts, and now these strange sounds, the evidence is stacking up. Whether it's a Sasquatch or something else entirely, one thing is clear. There's something out there worth investigating. The strange sounds from the Sam Houston National Forest remain a mystery. While most local wildlife has been ruled out, one possibility, the coyote, was close, but not a perfect match. The Sierra Sounds, famous for allegedly capturing Bigfoot language, had a completely different tone and rhythm. But here's some advice. If you ever find yourself in the Sam Houston National Forest, like Boyd Sims, keep your recording device ready. You never know what you might hear or see. The mysterious 1997 sighting. Now, let's shift gears to May 23, 1997, in the Catskill Mountains of New York. Doug Pridgeon and his friends were camping out for a nearby music festival. It was a typical Friday night around the fire, until it wasn't. Doug was filming his friends when something unexpected happened. In the background of his footage, a shape appeared between the trees. At first, it was just a shadowy figure, but then it climbed into the branches and started swinging. Take a closer look at that swinging motion. This isn't someone in a costume. The fluidity, speed, and control of the movement suggests something with serious agility, and likely less weight than an adult human. Those branches wouldn't support most people, but they seemed perfect for this creature. Skeptics might shrug this off as a hoax, but others believe it could be a young Sasquatch. The idea of a baby Bigfoot might seem far-fetched, but sightings of smaller ape-like creatures have been reported, though they're rare.
Are we filming now? We're filming. Okay, over here.
One of the earliest stories dates back to the 1800s in British Columbia during the construction of the Trans-Canadian Railroad. Workers reportedly saw a small, ape-like creature, knocked it out with a rock, and captured it. The accounts describe how the creature refused certain foods and behaved in ways that puzzled onlookers. Some reports even claim the creature was shipped to the UK but died en route and was unceremoniously dumped overboard. Others speculate that it ended up in P.T. Barnum's traveling circus, possibly inspiring one of his famous attractions. The 1997 Catskill mystery deepens. Now, back to Doug's footage. Cliff Barackman and other experts believe the video might show not one, but two Sasquatches. Look closely at the lower part of the screen. You can see a larger figure moving through the brush, possibly a mother keeping watch while the juvenile explores the trees. This observation challenges a common misconception about Bigfoot. Many people imagine Bigfoot as a solitary creature, wandering alone through the wilderness. But if Sasquatches are real, they're not lone individuals. Like any species, they reproduce, care for their young, and possibly live in small family groups. So why don't we hear more about juvenile Bigfoot sightings? It might be for the same reason you rarely see baby pigeons or squirrels. They stay hidden until they're strong and capable enough to fend for themselves. A young Sasquatch climbing trees might be an incredibly rare glimpse into their secretive world. If the Catskill footage is genuine, it could provide compelling evidence that Sasquatches not only exist, but are raising families in remote areas. And while skeptics will always have their doubts, moments like this keep the search alive for those eager to uncover the truth. Mothers in the animal kingdom are fiercely protective of their young, and it's no different if we're talking about creatures like Sasquatches. If these elusive animals exist, it's likely their young are hidden away in secluded nests or shelters, safe from predators, until they're strong enough to venture out on their own. So, is this possible baby Bigfoot caught on film ready to step out into the world? Or is it something else entirely? Some skeptics have suggested the figure in the Catskill Mountains video could simply be a human child swinging in the branches. But there's a problem with that idea. Humans, even agile ones, just don't move the way this creature does. The speed, fluidity, and confidence in its movements through the trees suggest it's something other than human. Could it be a small bear? Infant bears are known climbers after all. But Jeff Meldrum, a leading Bigfoot researcher, disagrees. He points out that the creature's anatomy, particularly its limb proportions, is much closer to an ape's than a bear's. Its long arms and the way it moves aren't far off from what you'd see in a small chimpanzee. To further explore the mystery, wildlife biologist Stephanie Manka was brought in to analyze the footage. Based on typical primate behavior, she found it odd that the young creature would be so far away from its mother. Primates usually stay close to their young, especially in unfamiliar or noisy environments. And let's not forget, this was a crowded music festival, full of loud sounds and people. Would a protective mother Sasquatch really let her baby climb trees near humans? Manka didn't think so. Instead, she believes there's a simpler explanation. The creature is likely a black bear cub. Bears are opportunistic feeders and often scavenge around areas where humans gather, especially if there's food involved. Festivals are a prime spot for bears to sniff out easy meals. It's not unusual for mother bears to send their cubs up trees as a safety precaution while they forage below. To Manka, the behavior in the video matches that of a bear cub more than anything else. But not everyone is convinced. Meldrum still stands by his theory that the creature's limb proportions are more consistent with a primate, not a bear. The way it climbs and swings doesn't match the stiff, clumsy movements of a bear cub. For now, all we can do is keep looking, keep listening, and keep asking the questions. Because every piece of evidence, every strange sound, every footprint, and every fleeting shadow brings us one step closer to uncovering the truth. Until then, stay curious, stay observant, and who knows, the next big discovery could come from you.